And we're live. Welcome everybody. Fake Whale. It's been a minute, but happy to be back in action with Borrás, our guest today, Borrás. Welcome, man.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, super stoked to dive into this conversation. I've been thinking about it, quite a bit, because I feel like there's some relation between our work, a little bit. So I think we have a lot to talk about. But how to start that conversation, man, like looking through your body of work and reading about your work, I don't want to say dense because it's not hard to understand really, but there's a lot. It seems like you have a lot to say and your concepts are very thought out, very, developed even linguistically, if you could say that in a way, so like I think in your bio, it even said like, your works are essayistic, which is a word I haven't even heard before, but I was like, yeah, I get that. That makes sense, so to begin, just to like fill everybody in, because I do feel there might be some people coming to this conversation who are not super familiar with your work. And to preface how I just want to dive directly into the heart of it, I'm just going to start with your bio, if you don't mind. I'm just going to read this a little bit. Basically, it says you're a visual artist based in Madrid and Berlin. Your work examines the relationship between human, nature, and technology, the purpose of evolution, and the idea of death and eternal life with a transhumanist perspective. You have developed a work complex that encompasses visions of post-human state of consciousness. Its centers on focus is based on interconnectivity between biodiversity and technological progress, and the philosophical concept of adaptation as a method of surpassing categorical limits of existence. And that's where I'm going to stop, because that is where I found a lot of interest and a good point to dive in. What the fuck do you mean? Like, I get it, like I know, but like I want to hear what you mean as the philosophical concept of adaptation as a method for surpassing categorical limits of existence.
Thank you for the question. The text was written by Julia, the CEO of Pylon Hub. So what she meant precisely, she can only explain us, but I presume that she was, because this text was before a long conversation we had together, and it was for the publication of one of my catalogs. So I presume what she meant is that my work, or let's put it this way, what I mean with my work when I speak about adaptation is that I started to investigate, as most of us as artists, about the zeitgeist, about the spirit of our time, because I kind of have the feeling that this is precisely what we do. It doesn't matter the colors, the shapes we use, or the language, or the goal we have. In the end, probably we can say is what we have are different theses that describe the spirit of our time. And that happens in every period of the history with those artists. And I thought what it is, what defines us, that was the main question in the end as an artist that you can try to answer. And I started to learn and to study and to have a big digital and physical archive here in my studio of things that are, like, for me, very relevant of our time. Most of them have a very specific type of colors. Those are the colors you can see in my work. Most of them have a very specific type of shapes, and those are the shapes you can see in my work. So, and as you can see them, they are ergonomic and soft and elastic and these kind of things. And after some trips to several places in the world, like Dubai, we can speak about that later, and Sri Lanka, and some trips I did there to visit some relevant things for my work, I realized that adaptation, it's in the end the key word that can grab everything. So let me explain it like this. What we are doing now, and actually in every period of the story, is to imagine what the future will be, what is the future that we are going to have, and what I have discovered, let's say, if we can use that word, is that this is precisely what defines us the best. What we think that is going to happen and what we think how that is going to look like. And the way that we think that is going to look like, of course, it's not going to be like this, but we think it will be. It has to do with the idea of shapes that adapt to themselves, things that are adapted to themselves in every level you can imagine, in a language level, in an industrial level, in a philosophical level, in every level. You know, adaptation is what can be the key word for that. If we are speaking about technological progress, we can speak about adaptation in a deeper way and why this is a key thing. But if we speak about botanics and biology, we can observe the same and the same kind of goals and ideas. Everything is about adaptation. Everything is in a way about survive and not die and be eternal, or the dream of being eternal and expand ourselves. No?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's why that touched a nerve with me about this idea of adaptation, because I've been thinking a lot about that too. Is like, you know, adaptation is to be adaptable is the ultimate trait of for almost anything when it really comes down to it. Like being and like you just said, even in biodiversity, I thought a lot about evolution, where it's not like the smartest or who can make the best plan, which would be the opposite almost of being adaptable. Like being great at making a plan is good for one thing, but like Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. So like what then is better than the plan is being adaptable. Like, so how can you work on being adaptable? That's something I'm working on and thinking a lot about. So this idea of adaptation as a method for surpassing categorical limits of existence, I found very interesting as well. And I can see it in your work, but I think here is where it touches on, well, okay. I could go two directions right now. Fuck. I want to touch on something that you said already about being defined as what we think the future will look like, and how it never ends up that way. Or maybe you didn't say exactly that, but that's kind of how I took it, because I've thought a lot about that too. Especially because I love sci-fi and I read a lot of sci-fi. And in sci-fi, there's all these different ideas, and like it's even so interesting reading such great sci-fi, and it says like 2022 is like the future from when it was written. You know, like we already lived through this and it is nothing like that, you know, like, so I find that to be a really interesting concept. I even thought about it a while ago. In my lifetime, I've seen what the future looks like change. Like at one time when I was younger, the future was very angular, just in shape, how you said, very angular and sharp. The 80s version of the future is sharp, angular, glitchy almost. It has those hard edges. It's definitely a product of the technology available at the time, etc. And then through my life, I remember early Tumblr days, and when early 3D graphics used by artists or 3D software used by artists started coming out, and it started getting gooey. I was just like, wow, look at this. Here we go. Like the future used to be all angles, and now it's just goo. Like that, you know, just that observation alone. Like, is there anything you have to say about that? Or like, what do you think about that? Or like, how does that even relate to what we're talking about, I guess?
Oh, it's a very interesting point. The thing that I have discovered during this ongoing investigation, because my work has a lot to do with investigate from an anthropological perspective, what I have discovered about that is this. Not only in science fiction we project a future that never happens, also in history and in society, beyond literature or poetry, believe that the future is going to be in a very particular way. Let's put an example. In the year 1910, you can see some very beautiful paintings about that in internet. You can see how they thought 100 years ago, how we were going to live today. And it's very attractive. It's a very beautiful painting because you see that they are floating over the sea with some kind of vapor machines and some globes, some balloons attached to them, and they have some corsets here, and everything looks totally like their time. This is exactly what happens to us at this very moment. This could be anecdotic, I totally understand, but there's something deeply important behind that from my point of view. And this is that we kind of, we don't want to die. Everything speaks, science fiction and anthropology, everything speaks about the fact that we want to live forever. Why we are so kind of attracted, if not obsessed, with the idea of future, and we project all the time this fantasy, because we think, from my perspective, that somehow if we if we substitute God, if we, like Frankenstein, like Victor Frankenstein, if we can achieve our goals and we can create new matter, a new technology, or a new creature, a new monster, then we can live forever somehow, you know. And that's some kind of wonderful fantasy that never happens. And what I have also discovered is that even nowadays, that applies nowadays. When we think about androids and artificial intelligence and bionic parts of the body and everything, I have studied all of them, and I collaborate with biotechnologists. I have seen in Dubai and many other places in the world factories where they build androids, and place laboratories where they build bionic arms and everything. And what I have discovered is, it is, let me explain it this way, it is like the Wizard of Oz. It is a fantasy. We want to believe on that, but we are not there at all. Not at all. It's just that we really want to project ourselves on that, on those androids. But if you go to those places, they are not at all like the people normally expect they are. Absolutely not. It is totally not what we think it is. You see the failures, you see the fake sites, you see that they are not working as they are supposed to work. It is a wonderful fantasy, and I am so attracted about that fact, because it describes us very well, very well. You know?
Oh, I really love that. I love that a lot. Wow, this is rich. There's so much to talk about. I mean, when you say that you went there and it's like the Wizard of Oz, you know, and like it's not what we project onto it and everything like that. Like I inherently just feel that all the time about technology. Like there's like a veneer that's really cool and shiny and stuff, but like really when it comes down to the nitty gritty of it all, like it's not what anybody thinks it is yet, at nowhere near. Like we're not, this isn't ex machina any yet. Like I think people imagine where they make androids probably looks like the backstage of or like the back of Westworld. The new Westworld is all like glass boxes and like shit like that, you know. And like I imagine it like a Ford Motor Factory, like, you know, because I come from a lineage of like mechanics and shit. My dad used to take apart cars and stuff all the time, and like to somebody who doesn't know how a car works, just like a phone or whatever, it's magic. But like once you take one apart and put it back together, you're like, yeah, it's kind of shitty how that works, and this isn't right, and that's imperfect, and blah blah blah. So I imagine it to be somewhat similar right now with androids, but then also to, I mean, we could go so deep into the AI thing, but people are projecting so much into AI right now that it kind of has forced me to think about what the fuck is AI? What is it doing, especially with imagery and stuff? And it still seems like a stupid tool to me in its progress. Like it's a tool. I could see it being useful in some respects. I see aspects of it like ChatGPT being really interesting, more so than imagery wise. But the way that people project into it is really what is more fascinating about it itself. Like to me right now, that people want to attribute it so much already. They want to believe in this consciousness, and when it comes down to it, as I've asked like programmers of AI, why do you think that this will become sentient at some point, and that the end, it just, they don't have an answer for that besides they believe it. And I'm like, well, that's that's just nothing then, man. Like a belief is fucking nothing. Like it means absolutely nothing. Like, so like all this is to me, it's just like this over. So like, and all this is just to say back to the point that you're saying is like that speaks volumes about us. All of that speaks volumes about us. I spoke with, who said this? I bet you Ali could tell me right off the bat. It was Mr. Quadramandi, fucking what's his face. But anyways, I asked him the question about like why do people do that to AI right now? Like give it these human attributes and stuff, anthropomorphize it or whatever. And he was like, it's the same as like people see a picture of a dog walking on his hind legs and you're like, that's so awesome. It's just like a person. People want to do that with everything. He's like, they want to do that with AI right now. What is your take on that, if I can ask you? What does it say about us, I guess? Or like why, like you're saying that like that speaks about us, and like if I'm understanding you correctly, to me, like, well, that is more the point for you than even really investigating the actual technology of what the technology is.
I think it can be explained. I mentioned it slightly before, but now I can go deeper into that. If you remember the book from Mary Shelley, Frankenstein, or the story that has been 1,000 times filmed and shown, but if you think about that from a philosophical perspective, there you have the answer. Victor Frankenstein, the doctor, wanted to create something out of death because he wants to be eternal in a way. That's we all humans somehow want to be in a way, in a philosophical perspective. We don't want to die, or we want to live, we want to last more because this is something beyond our control, because we want to be among people we love or do things and so on. The point is, what he creates in the book is a creature, and the book is better described, that is in a way better than us. It's not violent at the beginning at all. It's just a creature that is stronger and can last more than us. But he, Victor, the doctor, and the entire society reject that because they feel scared about that. This is also the theory of the uncanny valley. We want to create things that are similar to us because we project us on those things, like an android or like Frankenstein is totally the same, or ChatGPT. We project ourselves on those things, but we feel scared about them because then the reflection we have from them is our own, can you say in English, the futility, the fact that we are going to die, that we are imperfect, that we are nothing compared to...
Yeah, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I love this idea of the uncanny valley. The term has been used more and more in recent years, and I feel like it gets misused more and more recently. You seem to be the perfect person to define maybe what the uncanny valley is, because my understanding of it was kind of this idea that, like, more so this idea that the uncanny valley is the feeling of that we get when we see something that we tried to make that's like us and falls short. And in that falling short of being like us, because we can't actually repeat ourselves, in that falling short, there creates like almost a tension. And in that tension, that's the uncanny valley, why we reject everything like it, why it makes us uncomfortable. Like when we saw, what's the fucking dude's name? Jordan something or whatever. The guy who did the dancing robot in the mirror, which was like so unsettling. You know, like to me, that was like the perfect uncanny valley. Maybe he even named it that. I don't know. But like that was like the depth, like, you know, it's mimicking us in this way. It's not offensive in any way. It's not overtly gross, but it made me feel disgusted and like queasy, you know? That's uncanny valley. But it seems to be used a lot these days where it's just like thrown around in a less loaded, I guess, way. Could you maybe fill us in on what that really means or what we're talking about here?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I'll try to explain my perspective with a very simple example. I used in my pieces of art, in my video arts and my films, androids frequently and technology. When I used in a recent past an android that is called Oliver, it's funny that the android must have normal human name.
Yeah.
But the thing is that Oliver looks a little bit like a human. It's a humanoid, but it's closer to R2D2 and this kind of robots. And when people see this robot in my exhibitions, they feel like, oh, it's so sweet, it's so tender, because the shape of this robot, if you see it, it is truly very sweet. It is very far from us in an anthropological form. It's not very well defined on purpose. So it's sweet, it's like a little child. When I film, like I did a few months ago, Alter 4, which is a very advanced android, very similar to us. It has skin and hands that are like our hands with this kind of complex shapes. And also the face of the android is very human, and even the muscles to smile and to put a lot of expressions. When people see this android in my work, they feel really surprised and scared. And this is, as you said, because people fear what is new. It is the same with contemporary art. They cannot understand what they cannot define. And if you see something that is almost a human, you people think that they don't know this android response or what this might mean. And then when people see this android in my films, hundreds of questions appear all the time. Like, can this android walk? Can this android cry? Were you talking with this android during the filmation? And then,
is it noticeable that it's an android? Like, can they tell? Can the viewer tell immediately that it's an android, or is it a question of whether or not it's human?
They can tell because the famous Japanese professor Hiroshi Ishiguro that designs it made it on purpose with a very humanoid shape, mostly in the face and the arms, but the rest on purpose. The rest,
Yeah, I see.
everything is very metallic and easy to understand that it's a machine. The same professor, the same Japanese professor, made, this is a very interesting story, a perfect copy of himself. You can see it on internet. Hiroshi Ishiguro is the name of the professor, and he's like a doppelganger. You cannot see the difference. This is really uncanny, and it is totally the extreme of that. And people really feel very the feeling that people have when they see my android and this android is like very negative, because reflects fears. We don't know what that means. And if you don't know something, you fear that. But that's the story point. Between us, it means, I mean, how should I say it? There's no reason to be scared. There's no reason.
Yeah. I guess the question comes to, like, why is it then, like you said, the robot that's more like R2D2 and it's small and whatever is fine, and then the one that could be like literally the exact same thing just in a different form that looks more like us, and we're like, oh fuck, like that's not. But I mean, there is something very interesting there. Have you, like, not to get off topic at all, I'm going to come right back to this, but have you ever read the book by Olga Raven, The Employees?
No.
It's a sci-fi book. It's exactly what we're talking about. It's all about these objects that they're putting into these rooms for these employees that are working on some space station, and they interview them about the objects and all these like, it's super weird. But what you're talking about is almost exactly like it. So I'm going to put that out there. Olga Raven, The Employees would be a great touch on this if anybody's listening and interested. I'm going to read it again now, look at your work. And now coming back to it, the color thing you brought up already too, does that have a lot to do with this at all? And if not, or how does it tie in to this and your work? Because you have already brought up color. I've I'm looking at your work right now, which is paging on your, website, and it's the background of your self in your studio right now. We're in the world that, it's all this void, white void in a way. It's sterile, which are themes that I've seen before, but the way that you do it is like super, like pretty pushed very far. You are very conscious of the materials you're using, very obviously. You said you've already worked with, all these different robotics labs and shit like that. So um, I want to talk about the aesthetic choices. Color has a lot to do with that. That thing looks like egg. You have this like kind of egg color, almost pastelishness to your work, but not Easter, but not like fucking Easter. So it's very dialed in. You can just see that it's like so much attention has been put into how you present your work, yourself. Can you just talk about that a little bit? What this world is that you're creating? Because clearly it's this sterile universe that you're creating.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But like, and while I say sterile, I want to clarify too, because sometimes sterility can be seen as a negative, but in your work there's a warmth to it, like with the eggs and stuff like that. So it's like almost like this. Yeah, it's like this bio sterility or something. So like, yeah, if you want to talk a little bit about that, even though it's such a broad question.
Sure. No, I like the word you used to describe. Normally, I used also, and people tend to use aseptic and clinical and this kind of things, which everything is very correct, to be honest. The reason to use a very specific palette of colors, and that one is because during the last years of the development of my work, I realized that first, I personally felt very attracted about these certain colors, and then I started to ask myself why I was attracted about that, and I realized that, as I said, I am obsessed about the description of our time, of the zeitgeist. It is really a true obsession, and I thought that these clinical colors, this kind of pastel blue and this pink and these colors are in many different fields of society, like in the clothes we use for sports, but also in hospitals and also in the pleasure area of the objects to have sex with and these kind of things. You can see them in many places, and I thought that the reason behind that, and I love that fact, is that they are both at the same time soft, and they look like calm and relaxed. They give you the message of calmness and wellness and peaceful feeling. And in one hand, you have that, and this is the reason industrial designers use it nowadays all the time. And in the other hand, it has also some sort of darker, twisted connection with pleasure and a sexuality behind that. It could be long to describe that, but you can see that there are very interesting theories about that. And capitalists, our current capitalist, has found that this connection is perfect. So you feel some sort of sexual attraction about a yoga ball for some reason, and also about the soft cover of your iPhone because it looks kind of sexy but sweet, but no. And if you go to your clinic to have some dental surgery or whatever, you're surrounded also about those colors because you feel some sort of peaceful neo-okay. No, you feel like, oh, everything is clean, everything is soft, is tender, is nice. I can feel all right here. Okay, this is what somehow capitalists want us to feel, and I totally understand. I also want to feel like this. I make yoga and these sort of things, and I don't make a critic about that. I understand that. The reason behind that is that we are more operative for our society. There's something darker behind that. We are better for our liquid modern society if we are related to each other with this kind of yoga, wellness, soft, tender, sexy, sweet idea. So what I do when I observe that, I started to collect in my studio hundreds of. If I could turn the camera, you would see that my studio is totally like my films and installations. Everything is here. Is like a futuristic clinic. You couldn't imagine, really. And this is only, and my exhibitions are like this, like here, are like the sublimation, the exaggeration to the limit of what I observed. So what I build in every installation, in every film, in every work I do, is some sort of heaven, of limbo, of an artificial exaggeration of what we have now. A huge projection of this unrealistic future we think we are living in. You know? That's the thing. So you feel in my installations, you feel with this. Normally I have ASMR sounds and smoke and drones flying and people making yoga, and you have these soft colors, and you feel like safe there. It's like what I call a soft cave. We used to live in the past in hard, dark, like cyberpunk caves, if we can use that, if we can understand that. And now we project ourselves in this soft cave, like an eternal Brian Eno song. It's so sweet here, no? We want that, so I just give you that.
I'm glad you brought up ASMR. It's something I wrote down as you were talking, when you were talking about industrial design and blah, blah, blah. I just was thinking ASMR for sure with all this. So like, obviously that's tied in. So just cross that off. But what you were just saying about, there's two things, but one of them is that I'm interested in that transition, like, because I know, like, I mean, I still love the old fucking cyber cave, the old, the dark angle, like, so like I said, when we were like kind of in a rant earlier about like the future at one time was angular and sharp and like dark and, and now it's like what you were just explaining. What's what happened in the transition between that? Like why did that happen? I mean, it's difficult because it's just like aesthetics change. I get that, but like, it's so interesting. Like, it's like, what in society happened that has, because we could have went probably in a multitude of directions. There's probably a number of ways, but this was the one. And maybe you did already allude to it, because another thing I wrote down that I wanted to go towards was like, you said there's a dark undertone to this. There's a capitalist undertone and a darkness to it, which I understand viscerally and kind of intellectually, but I want you to talk more about that. And do you think have anything to do with the transition we went from the cyberpunk cave into the cloud, is how I see it, into the fucking, yoga fucking cloud of wellness, which I too, I take what serves me from that as well. But I also see and I see this in your work too, and I hope you don't mind me saying it, but there's an absurdist level to it. Like you said, you push it to an extreme. And when I look at your work, I do see a level of absurdism. Like I'm looking right now as a person washing a robot hand or like a biological hand or something like that, which on one aspect I find is like, oh, that's sweet in a sense. And then I start thinking, maybe that's their lover's hand or something, that they actually, that's in their, washing their, but then I think too, it's like, well, maybe that's just their pet or something, or like, maybe this is all just a fucking joke. Like this is silly, or, it's like, so you go to the absurdism. So anyways, to tie this all back to like what happened from our angular cyberpunk, where from Hackers, the movie Hackers in the 90s, like that was, to me, do you remember Hackers, or is that a cultural reference only Americans? I loved Hackers. I loved Hackers. To me, it defined internet aesthetic in the early days, like the very early, even though it was like, it's the perfect idealized, doesn't make any fucking sense, because they would show like they went through the phone lines and all of a sudden they're inside the computers and there's the shit flying around them and stuff, and it was all dark and it was just silly and stuff, but it's awesome. But in that same way, almost like, so is this, it's a different, so what happened in between? I guess I'll shut up, sorry to rant, but like, do you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely. I think it's a very interesting point. First of all, I love cyberpunk, I love Hackers, and I love the recent projection we used to have about the future, this darkness. I grew up with that. I loved all that cinema. I love Alien, for instance, and David
Even
Cronenberg.
Matrix was like on the verge where it was still cyberpunk. It was still the old version. Like I feel like Matrix now would come out and it would be like everything would they wouldn't be going into like caves where there's like these
Yeah,
machines and all that stuff. It would be this this other idea. So like
yeah.
that was in this verge, but it still is like the cyberpunk. So yeah, go on, please. Sorry.
No. I agree. I think, for example, I grew up mostly with this terror science fiction films. It is a very important influence for me, and what I learned from those films is this idea of the. Do you remember what that was called, the new flesh cinema? You see those monsters and that flesh, that horrible,
Hmm.
full of blood and this darkness, and like the movie of The Fly, for example. What I mean with that is that uh, what I realized by learning from that cinema, and also learning in the by every period of the history. Now I know now it's like, but what I want to say that every time in the 80s, in the 70s, in the 90s, but also in the Renaissance. Also, if you go back to the ancient Egypt and you see the paintings there, what we normally do somehow, slightly, if we can resume all that, is to show the doppelganger, to show what we think what are our monsters. This is the reason a lot of artists show what they dream or what they fear, and we build creatures like, I don't know, for example, let's go for the paintings of Goya, no, in one hand, or let's go for the sculptures of the Chapman brothers, no, for very different epochs of story. You can take everything in cinema, in sculpture, in painting, everything, and we are so connected with the idea of the monster that that is a very important point in art. What now happens, I think, is that we are kind of we are like, okay, I had enough. We, a society, not me, as society, we felt like I had somehow enough with the Mad Max feeling, which I loved. But I think the society felt like, okay, enough of this. Please give me something new. What happened there? The philosopher Lipovetsky explained it very well in a very simple way. At a certain point in the 60s, no, sorry, in the 80s, 90s, we started to develop the society that wanted to feel well. And then we had this explosion of yoga and these sort of things. The colors we talked about, and all and the us and air, and all those things appeared because society wanted to feel good, and we project ourselves in a future where everything is soft and elastic and clean and good. The funny thing about that is that this is also a form of a monster. This is also our doppelganger. This shows us just a new form of a very dark, twisted shape of our society. This is what I call the modern monster. Our new monster is not like Alien anymore, but it is like in my films, is a guy with a very beautiful yoga clothes, but also with these ergonomic shapes. Here I call it the ergonomic jewelry. It's something softer and cleaner, but it is still the doppelganger, the darker side of ourselves. It is just that now this reflects us better, this liquid society, that Lipovetsky and Bauman said. That everything is soft, everything is elastic, everything is clean. Our monster should be like this now, not like Alien anymore. No?
Liquid society, is that a term that they use?
Yeah, Bauman used
Yeah.
that idea. In a way, this term explains the fact that society is always pushing you and me and all of us to be all the time beautiful and sexy and young, and we have to be here and there all the time, and because we are flexible in terms of time, of sexuality, of gender, of everything, we are just sexy, sweet, and flexible in every level. So we are somehow like liquid in a way. Everything like is so related and so elastic that now is kind of scary in a way. No, this is the point of the liquid society. This
The
darkness.
term is great.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead with the darkness. I want to know more like about the darkness of it, because that's super.
I just wanted to say that this is truly for me the kind of a nightmare in a way. So I feel very attracted about that, about this liquid, beautiful yoga wellness idea. This is the reason you see it in my work, but I can easily admit the huge dark side of it, the twisted side of it. If I can mention just one concept, one little concept, Edmund Burke, the philosopher, said that we are eternally attracted about sublimation. What he meant is that we are always attracted about what scares us. In the Romanticism times, it was a dark well or a cliff or darkness, these kind of things. No, nowadays are androids and chat gpt and these kind of things. It's just a light, soft, tender form of the same darkness from my perspective,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
A light form of darkness is like, yeah, that's perfect. That's something I've yeah, in a different context, it's something I've been actually exploring a lot. Like I've used the term crushing light a lot, just like the idea of like too much illumination is bright or is blinding, like the harshness today isn't in darkness anymore, like the way that I see it, at least, because my work is dark. We're almost opposites in a way. We're almost exploring similar things in really different ways. But my work's very dark, but like when people talk about my work being dark anymore, I'm like, I don't know. I feel like if I'm really going to represent darkness today, I have to work very bright. Like, because to me, that's where the real fucking, like, I don't know. It makes sense to me, like this sense of illumination, I guess. Maybe we're talking about the same thing, almost like this wellness and everything. It's kind of that idea of like, like enlightenment and illumination of ourselves and our inner selves and our true spirit and all that shit, like, yeah, too much illumination and you're going to go blind. Like, yeah, that's a different kind of crushing
I see,
in a way.
I see the connection between your work and my work. I feel very attracted about your work. Honestly, I think you also speak about this monster from your perspective and your own original language, and I love that. And what I love also about something that you have in your language is the expression of show the true colors. Not you have that expression, right, in English? Show the true colors of something. No, I don't.
Yes.
In Spanish, we don't say that, and I think it's a very interesting. If you take that sentence literally, somehow it's what you could say it's an analogy of what I do. Just in a way. So if I have to make the portrait of what we think we are and the projection of future, then I give you your true colors. It's not this what society expects from us, and it's not this the projection you want, this kind of soft cake. Then I give it to you in a very sublimate form, so it is even uncanny and uncomfortable to stay there. It is both at the same time nice to see my work and also like repulsive. And I love that feeling. Every time I grab that and the public tells me, I have this feeling with your work, I feel like, okay, success. This repulsion
Yeah.
there inside.
I love that. So not to jump around, but you've said this really earlier, and I circled it as you were talking just a little bit ago too, of this idea of the specificity of the future. How we project a future that seems very specific, like we're just talking about really now or whatever. But really, the reason it never ends up like we think is because the future like is non-specific. It makes sense to me, but maybe you could even explain that a little bit further too, the non-specificity of the future. Yeah, I guess viscerally I understand that right away, but I guess I wouldn't know exactly how to explain that besides the fact that like, besides to look back through what I've already lived through and be like, yeah, they've always projected this, we've lived through it, and it's like a little bit of that, and then a little bit of this, and a bunch of stuff that we didn't expect, and it actually looked completely different than what anybody, because it's impossible to predict what would actually happen or something like that. So I think that's just a really interesting point, that no matter what we do or no matter what we say, it's wrong. Like, right?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly. Nobody knows what is going to happen in the future and how it's going to look like and how it's going to be in any level. Nobody knows. The thing that I find so interesting and so attractive is that we are always nowadays and always in the past, in every period of the story, if you read about, I mean, we are projecting ourselves on that idea, but it would not be like that. We are just describing in a very specific and clear way our present, just our present, what we are attracted about, what we fear. This is the only thing that we are doing when we are projecting science fiction films or
Yeah.
doing contemporary art, pretending we are showing something new. No, it's new in the sense that it's just explaining the present, and we are going to fail. That's for sure. That's one thing. I love to study history, and I remember, for example, if you know the story of the Easter Island, that's one of the most interesting examples I have found in story. If you give me a minute, I think I can.
I would love to hear the story. I'm fascinated by Easter Island.
I'm sure that with my terrible English, I will explain.
Oh no, I'm sure it's great.
I'll do my best. To make the long story as short as possible, in the Easter Islands, they had they had the main island and little islands next to it, and then the people that were there, they started to live in the main island because it was with more natural resources, more animals, more trees, more water, right? The thing is that, and to make the story short, they felt so happy about that they started to grow and to grow and to grow, and then you had more humans there and more humans, and they started to build because they felt so happy being there. They felt also very thankful to the gods. So they built those beautiful, huge sculptures of those huge faces that people think when they think in the Easter Islands. There's those giant sculptures, no? And what started to happen then is that they started to have problems because they were finishing the natural resources. They had less things to eat, less water, less forest, and so the illness appears, and the people started to die, and they started to cut more trees, to build more totems, to thank the gods and to ask, to pray the gods, please help us. What's going on? So they cut more trees and they build more totems. And what happens in the end is that they had to leave that island, and the island became like a desert there. And what you could see there are just those huge humanoid totems. This is what happens in a way to us. We reach extinction the closer we reach to the highest point of technification or technological progress. In between, what we do is that we think we are reaching future, and we think somehow we are like little gods, like Victor Frankenstein in the book, no?
Mm-hmm.
But the only thing we are doing is not being sustainable, and because we are confusing technological progress and evolution with something like goddess, with something nice and beautiful, and we are forgetting sustainability. And this is the reason every huge empire in the history, Romans and Mesopotamia and all of them, disappeared all of them disappeared at the highest point of the technological progress. And the funny thing about that also is that during that period, they were projecting their own future. So if you see the books that they were doing, or the paintings, or the techniques the artists were using at that time, they were just projecting their present, you know, and they were always failing because they were just somehow attracted about their own idea of future and technological progress and devices. It's just a funny story we are just repeating on and on and on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fantastic. I mean, it's very clear too. Is that story about Easter Island, is that like a true, it's a dumb, maybe this is a stupid question. I feel stupid asking it, but is that like a true story, or is that like the best theory, or?
No, it's absolutely true. I read it
Yeah,
in a wonderful book. I always
fantastic.
recommend. It's the book is about an anthropologist it's called A Short Story of Progress. The book everything is about anthropology, and what you see in the book is this story, and also how in every in every period of the story, every empire disappeared because of the reason I have just explained. You
That's
can see
fantastic.
it's
Yeah.
a wonderful book.
I'm gonna look that book up for sure. It sounds fantastic. When you were talking, I thought about, I mean, this is way off topic, but I was like, I want to ask him what he thinks about the pyramids. Because I mean, isn't that fucking similar, right? Like well, the most recent theory, or like the theory that I hear, well, I mean, it's the theory of what Graham Hancock or whatever, right? Like, is that his name? Where he's like, there existed a civilization that is like as developed and as technologically advanced as we are today. They had that back then, and it just wiped out everything. Something happened, and it wiped out everything. And the thing is that they didn't have the materials that we have now, and all of their technology was made out of this stuff that could deteriorate and disappear over time. So the only thing we have left is these pyramids, and that's how they're made. We can't ever say. But I'm like, well, that makes the most sense, instead of somebody trying to explain how they've done, like in some weird other ways. But what do you think? Is Graham Hancock's, is that his theory? And also too, is that, do you identify with that?
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Do you identify with that?
With the idea of the extinction and technology.
Yeah, whereas like there could have been a civilization as advanced as we are today. It's just that their tools were made out of different things or whatever. It was wiped out in such a way, an extinction level event, and we can't recover certain things. But it's very possible that on this planet there has been a civilization, but their technology looked different. Everything. It's the same idea as like when we project the future, how we can't ever do it, and like it also goes back to what it doesn't actually go back to it, but I did wonder if like the pyramids ties into that same idea, sure, right?
Absolutely.
And then they go way back. The non-specificity of the future. It's a hard word to say. Non-specificity of the future. When we were talking about that too, it also seems that we can. Yeah, this is interesting, I guess, but well, like, I mean, you brought up that whole bringing up our own extinction thing. That's interesting. But the idea that we can choose something else, this is all just a choice, it seems like, and that why, like, that's what's interesting. And that's why it speaks about where we are now more than it does any other thing about now. It speaks about because we're obsessed with our own demise and the way that this was really clear, and like, you are so smart. I feel a little stupid talking to you sometimes with my dumb analogies and everything. But like, I read this book by Chana Porter on an airplane coming back from London last year, and it was an alien invasion story called The Seep. It's a new book, and it was new at the time, and it was like nothing I ever read before because it was completely different. It was an alien invasion where the aliens were like microscopic, and they interacted with us on a biological cellular level, and it was all positive. Like, everything they did for us was like interacted with us, made us better, helped us, like, and all they wanted to do was learn about us. And I was like, well, shit, like, this is a completely different kind of. And when I read about the book by what other people, and it's funny because they called it a soft invasion. You call it soft caves, but they called it a soft invasion. I was like, this is a completely different take on an alien invasion. We can make these decisions, and we choose to be like Terminator. You know, like, they're gonna kill us all. You know, and like, but like the science, and again, it brings up the idea that in science fiction, so many things that get written turn into reality eventually, and yada yada, and how those things work back and forth. But you brought up this idea of like they were so happy that they just built these things to praise the gods because they were so stoked, and like they just went over fucking board basically and overdid it and killed themselves. You know, like we're almost doing that same thing now, which I'm sure was why but like we're so interested in like the apocalypse and fucking all that shit, and it's like we're gonna bring it upon ourselves or something, you
Yeah.
know? Like it's really weird and interesting to me, and like I don't know. I feel in so many ways we're living in the apocalypse already and all these things. Why are we so attracted to that? And like, what is it like, what does it say about us beyond your work even, or like just on your own beliefs, or like, because clearly you think about this all the time. You said you're obsessed with this. Like, what is it saying about us as like our society and our time? Or is it saying nothing and it's just repeating the same fucking thing as the Easter Island or as maybe the people who made the pyramids, and we're just doing the same thing over and over again. It's the Prometheus story, you know, just
Yeah.
on repeat. We're just in it, and then in actuality, we're not special, and we're just one step of Sisyphean time. You know, that's all we're doing, just rolling up until the stone falls back on us.
Yeah, yeah, that's a very interesting question. And I have traveled around the world enough to observe that we are humans are in this period, but in every period, because I also study shamanism and different cultures, and but I can see that in my trips. That is true what you said. We are somehow uh, deeply attracted about death and extinction, and now and the apocalypse nowadays and in every period of the story. And if, let me tell you three little examples, three very interesting and little and short examples. One of them is that I went to Sri Lanka, a very beautiful country next to India, and I saw there a beautiful ceremony inside a temple, and the temple was beautifully covered with a lot of colors and shapes of animals and plants, all together with feminine shapes, and it was somehow similar, very similar to the alien Giger design.
Yeah.
Very similar in a
Yeah.
very interesting way. But there's a plot twist in the end. You'll see when you're in that temple. You see that sooner or later a ceremony starts. This is what happens to me, and you see a beautiful music that appears. A lot of people is playing music, and you see also that they are putting food, and they are also putting flowers and burning things all the time. It's very beautiful and violent in a way, because it's like everything together, life and death at the same time, burning things and plants and food and coconuts and honey everywhere. It's really marvelous. And then you started to see that the goddess, the statue of the goddess, is at the bottom of this temple, and they are washing the goddess and then covering it with food and then washing it again and again. And then I discovered that they were praying in that church, in that not church, in that temple, the goddess named Shiva, and precisely a story of Shiva that is about the frenetic dance. This is Shiva dancing, enjoying death and life at the same time. This is what they call in Sri Lanka the destruction construction dance. So people are just enjoying, in a way, death and the fact that after death somehow comes life. No, they are attracted about that. Another story. I went to Indonesia to a very beautiful volcano that is called Bromo. This is the experience that influenced my work the most. I was there, Bromo was active, and I could see a huge column of smoke coming out of the volcano. I could actually feel the sound and the vibration of the floor, and I had to cover my mouth with something because it was very toxic to be there. And I walked towards the volcano, and I was surrounded by a very dark kind of desert, completely flat. Nobody was there, and I had in front of me a huge dark volcano with this huge column like vibrating. I felt totally, there is what I understood the idea of adaptation, because it was very dangerous to be there, but I couldn't control myself. I needed to go towards the caldera, inside the volcano. I wanted to be there. This is something beyond my control. You know what happened when I was very close to the start of the beginning of the hill of the volcano? I saw there a little chapel, very small, very tiny, that it was built with the ashes of the volcano. I entered there. It was very dangerous. There's the smoke, everything. It was a very scary situation. I entered this little chapel, and I saw that there was a little altar done with the ashes of the volcano, and over it you could see carbonized fruit. What I understood there is that people cannot control themselves to be attracted by death and destruction at the same time and construction at the same time. When you are there, you understand that this volcano is both the end of explains very well the end of the planet Earth and the beginning of the planet Earth, because it's building new, new cover, a new ground for us, but it's also destroying plants and animals at the same time. I understand why we build churches and temples and totems to this idea, on and on and on. And this is the third story. In the ancient Egypt, they have a very beautiful story that is called, not story, ceremony. They do that every year. They were doing that in the past every year. That is called the beautiful festival of the valley. What they do there is like a rave, like the techno raves we do nowadays. They were doing that in the ancient Egypt. And what they were celebrating there was death. They were visiting their relatives, the relatives that were at the cemeteries, and they were drinking and dancing for 3 days long, just enjoying death and being alive at the same time, all together. No? So we are somehow attracted about this apocalypse all the time, and the idea of death everywhere, in every part of the world. We cannot control ourselves. And also here in post-capitalism and in Europe or in the United States nowadays, is absolutely the same. We just show it with different elements and shapes, but it's totally the same.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It was a huge
I loved every bit of it. And so many thoughts go through my mind, but yeah, I mean, I get, your answer is perfect. I don't even want to elaborate, just because it's like that. That's exactly it. It's not special. Like in this time, like that idea is not this unique thing to our time. That's that's the end. But
Jesse, can I ask you something? Don't you feel somehow more alive when you read the book you mentioned, or when you see a science fiction film that is about chaos and destruction, and then afterwards?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm so attracted to destruction and chaos, or creation through destruction is a theme that runs through my mind and my practice, my work, everything, so much. And it's exactly what I was going to bring up, is this. I think some people feel it more than others, but I think somewhat of what you're describing is in the French term "la pelle du vide." Are you familiar with that? Right? Have you heard of that? La pelle du vide. It translates to the call of the void. And I don't know why that's a famous term. If it was a movie or book, it was called, or just a something. But So the reason I bring it up is because it's the feeling I get every time, and people think I'm crazy for it. I'm not suicidal. I'm not fucking suicidal. But when I'm on the edge of a fucking building, I can't help, like, I don't want to go close to the edge of a building because I don't trust myself. And it's not that I'm going to throw myself off because I want to die. It's just because I'm like, I don't know what happened. What is that? I have an impulse though. I want to jump. It's just the same as like a bridge. I want to do that too. It's like I can't get too close because I can't trust myself that I might just fucking jump or just take a step off. This call of the unknown is so strong to me. That's what I take as the appel du vide. And I don't think it's that strong in everybody, but because when I say that to people, they're like, well, you're crazy and suicidal. I'm like, no, I feel like it's such a natural instinct. My friend had such a funny anecdote for it a long, long time ago, because this is a concept that I've been interested in for a long time. But he was like, yeah, whenever I drive over a bridge and I have my windows down in my car, I just want to chuck my phone out. I'm like, yeah, I guess that's a tiny version of it, where it's just like this call of chaos, this kind of like this will to chaos, this will to the absolute unknown or something like that. But I feel it very strongly. This call of the void in some
Absolutely.
sense,
If
which
you,
which in a
if
large
you're,
sense is just like the call of apocalypse. You know, like what you're saying.
totally, totally. The feeling that you describe is is very natural. I mean, it happens to almost all of us, if not all. You feel attracted when you are in front of a cliff because it's the same attraction you have to these monsters we were talking before. You are attracted about chaos, about about the unknown. You cannot handle it. It's something beyond yourself. If you see in retrospective my work, my films, my video arts, the ones that I have been showing the last years, you will see that most of them are with cliffs and wells and these kind of shapes of nature. Exactly the places where you feel like that you want to jump and you want to die, and you don't know at all what is going to happen next
A
beyond that.
volcano is so attractive to me, and also just terrifying too, because I feel like if I saw that shit, I would want to jump in there. It would be like it's
Yeah,
so in that way
yeah.
almost. It's just like whoa, like
It happened to
that.
me. I was about to die in that volcano, to be honest. So some guys had to appear and out of nowhere, because I thought I was alone there, and then they were like, "No, come back." It started to rain
Wow,
heavily, and they were like, "Please, please, please, come back, come back. You're
wow,
gonna die there." It's like, but
that
I was
sounds
just
so
going toward the volcano.
intense. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, it
yeah.
sounds like a beautiful experience. Honestly, it really does, but also very intense. Like, I'm glad you made it back. Um, so this is all great. Do you have a little bit more time? Are you good with time?
Yeah, yeah. I have a bit
Okay,
more
because
time.
I want to dive, like, I want to jump a little bit just from, because this has all been so great, but it's been very broad. We've gotten a chance to talk about your work some, of course, but you did bring up this idea of shamanism already, which is something I've been super interested into. I got a Joseph Beuys book here, right here. You're familiar with the artist Joseph Beuys?
Yes, absolutely.
Joseph Beuys was very interested in the idea of shaman, like the artist is shaman and stuff. So that's a particular topic I'm interested in. But more so, even than that, I want to talk specifically about your work. But I think it might tie in. I want to talk about your studio practice specifically. I want to under, like, this is a question I like to ask artists, and I'm personally, when I talk to another artist, most interested in, besides the philosophical stuff, which we covered for the last hour and 10 minutes. Is just like, what's your studio practice like? What's the day to day for you? It seems like you travel a lot. You're visiting robotics labs and stuff, which I'm sure it's all great. You do a lot of R&D. It sounds like. But when you're working on a project and you have, say, a deadline because you have to show something, what is your studio practice like? Do you have a big team? Do you have one place that you work out of? Do you have many places? Do you have no localized place and actually have a lot of studios with different people? I could see your practice just working in a lot of different ways. So I'm curious.
My regular day is coming to my studio, and do this thing. I mean, even if I have an exhibition, whatever, if I have an exhibition or if I don't have an exhibition, it's always the same thing. I come to my studio, which is a place that looks totally, as I mentioned before, like my installations and my work. This is a very important fact to understand what I do here next, what I'm going to say. The space is a very wide, huge, how do you say in English? Diaphano, do you say diaphano? Like open space.
I can imagine. It sounds just like a white box, pretty much, or like an open warehouse or something, you know?
Exactly. It is like this. I build it and design it in order to create a space that looks like a technological altar, very precisely. And in some parts of it, it looks absolutely like a laboratory. Absolutely like that. It's based on a laboratory. And I come here, I work only during the daylight. The light here, the natural light, is very beautiful. That's also very important. All the elements from the studio are very influence me on the work. So this is the reason I do this ceremony. I come here, the light is beautiful, the colors, everything is very well organized here, like an archive of a very crazy guy. If you come here, you will be like, everything is like, I know it's like, sometimes I
sounds like no heaven to me. It sounds great.
it is like this. I'm just comfortable in this kind of archive thing. And I come here, I put some soft music that inspire my work. It is always beyond something religious, always electronic music. It is there always because techno music is part of my work, but it has to have some kind of chorus, no people chanting. Like sometimes I put.
Okay, we're gonna just we're gonna take a quick pause because music was something I wanted to ask about. So like, you got to tell me some. I want to look some up, or I want to hear what you're talking about, because I wanted to know if music plays any role in your practice. Even if you just are listening to stuff in the studio, and then if so, what? Because you do seem so dialed in to this idea of total environment. You've heard that term before, total environment. I mean, that's what you're doing. You're like, I love the idea that when you're in your studio, anything you lay your eyes on can affect what you're doing or what you're thinking or everything. So you have to curate every single thing. Otherwise, you're basically at the mercy of, whatever else. That's kind of how I see it. So this idea of total environment is where there is no such thing as something unrelated to the practice.
But
you're dialed in it.
Exactly. This is not a jail or a chamber to me. The reason that I have this is because then I can be absolutely free to create anything that I want to create. I feel here in my working space so free to think ideas because everything is under control and everything is in the same, with the same colors, the same kind of techno music. Everything is the same. So then I can do whatever. And I spend here hours editing my films or reading about biology or technology or shamanism. I read a lot about shamans in different cultures, and botany, a lot about plants and what plants and mushrooms means with us. And music, there, if you want me to focus on that, plays a huge
for just a second, I would love to hear of what are some of the artists maybe that you listen to, or the there's so many different kinds of electronic music. I'm not even going to ask you what the name of the genre is, but it's like ambient-ish is what I'm expecting. I'm expecting like ambient, but you said there's like chanting and stuff, so that's super interesting to me.
I am not that kind of person that says I love everything in music. Not at all. No, I'm not. I like something very specific. I like mainly electronic music, and I have two main sources of inspiration. One is like techno music and minimal techno and this kind of sound that is to dance and to enjoy it in a club.
Sure.
And then I listen, like, I don't know, Zombie is, for example, a band that I love a lot. But a lot of bands that are inside that idea of electronic music to dance crazy. It must have, otherwise I don't put it, some sort of dark mood. It must have that. It's not fun, but something dark and sublime. Then I put it, basically. And the other resource of electronic music that I use is this called minimalist music and ambient music, as you mentioned, like Ligeti, for example, or Hans Zimmer sometime, and
Mm-hmm.
also some electronic music based on religious music with chants and these kind of things. This music must have also this dark mood, something that is sublime and gives you the idea of something scary. Both types of music must have that. Soft and nice, but at the same time, atmospherical and dark. Nothing beyond that is what I listen here in the
Is
studio.
there anything that you can name that has like the religious tone to it or whatever? Like not even just religious, but I understand what you mean, like not just like chanting or anything. Is there anything you can name like that off the top of your head?
Yeah, for example, yeah, I can mention Johan Johansson has a very beautiful album that is named Drone. Let me see. Uh, it's called Drone something. Drone Johan Johansson. Drone Mass. Yeah.
Oh, that's a
For
cool
example.
name.
Yeah, non-mass. Ligeti, mainly everything from Ligeti, this composer, this contemporary composer, is more or less around that. What else?
Very
The
cool.
the original soundtrack of the film, The Thing. Have you seen The Thing?
Yeah, but not for like the original.
The original soundtrack of the movie The Thing has that. Absolutely. I listen this
Awesome.
on loop. And then
Sick.
I also play directly music that is chants from Tibetan sculptures and and these kind of things. Literally, just combine those.
Very, yeah, sure. No, the reason like well not the only reason, but I was in Dubai, which you mentioned too earlier, but I was in Dubai earlier this year and I was so jet lagged the whole time I was there. I don't think I slept hardly at all, but I would run a lot. I would go on runs. That was like what I would do at night. Everybody would go to bed. I would be like, okay, I got like 3 hours and I'll go on a run and whatever. But so I would run in the middle of the night and at 5 a.m. Every morning throughout the city, they would have prayers on the loudspeakers and would just echo through the cities. And the first time, which was the very first night I was there, I had headphones in and I'm running and that starts. And I'm just like, what the fuck? And I take out my headphones. I'm like, this is something like, is this? And I Google right away, like what's going on. And I realized, okay, this is normal. And then I realized, oh, it's a lot of places. I end up like running to all these different chapels that were just in the city, built into their architecture because it's so integrated. Those their mosques are so integrated in a city. I loved that. I loved the sound. By the end of it, I was running specifically at the time so that I could run during the chanting, because that's what the prayer sounded like to me. I didn't understand. It sounded like chanting, just echoing through this science fiction city because I got to run around. We were staying right by if you're familiar, the harbor or whatever that's called, that
Yeah, sure, sure.
beautiful loop. And so
Yeah,
that's what I was
absolutely.
running around listening to chanting. I'm like, this is insanely dope. Like, this is
Yeah.
so cool. It felt so, it just had a great vibe. And like, then when you brought this up, I was like, I want to listen to that shit. Anyway, so that's why I
I,
identified with it.
absolutely. It's very interesting that you mentioned that because the first time I went to Dubai, I was filming there many locations to develop the body of work of my films. And when I was listening to those chants, I was recording them with my recording machine. And those chants from the Dubai ceremonies are used in my films. Every time I
Amazing.
go, I travel to a different part of the world where they have this type of religious chants. I record them all the time. I have a lot of recordings from those things, and then I use them. I just
That's
alter the
fantastic.
sounds and I use them.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, that's so cool.
Oh, sorry.
No
Sorry.
problem. No problem.
Sorry.
Um, okay. Thank you for that list. I'm gonna look up all those. They sound wonderful. Then I wanna get into just a little bit the shamanism idea, just like because not everybody's familiar even just with shamanism, I guess, but
Oh,
the
yeah.
idea of the artist being a shaman, is something that is repeated throughout history. Like we brought up earlier, Joseph Beuys, he, to me, is one of the more contemporary ones who really said it, at least outright. Not many today will say it without being like, okay, you're a hippie. Oh, go to Burning Man, loser. Some shit like that. But I'm actually super interested in the concept of it. Could you explain maybe how that ties into your practice? And also, it does seem like if you view it that way, that almost is your practice, and that is almost becomes an artistic philosophy that you can work through. Could you maybe just talk a little bit about shamanism and your work, and then maybe how that is, informs your practice? Yeah, I
Mhm.
guess
Sure.
that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. I think the concept of shamanism is very important in my work, only because my work is a reflection of what I consider a description of society. So it's a reflection of society. I believe that shamanism is a very important part of different cultures. This is the reason I just adapted. Why I believe it is so important and now is a protagonist element in my work, because I think that we somehow, if you study shamanism in different cultures, which I have done, you see that shamans, to make the story as short as possible, they used masks very frequently, or they dressed in a very particular exotic way. They just create some sort of fictional ceremony because they must impersonate, they must be some sort of monster. Again, the idea of monster. All the time we reach to this idea. They are the monster, they are the Frankenstein, they are the creature, not human anymore. They are connected with what is beyond us, with something spiritual. No? But it's everything fictional thing. I love that fact. It's just a theater, it's just a ceremony. We are just building masks. This is what I do in my work. If you see all my installations, films, and everything, what you see is some sort of modern monster. It's some sort of mask. So what I offer to the public with the thesis of my work is the idea of a fictional religious, a futuristic religion, which is not true. I just combine elements from the present to do what we do in society, project a future, and then I create in every piece I do some sort of shaman. Every work I do has a protagonist, and this protagonist is some sort of magician, witch, or shaman, and they are dressed in a very particular way in order to give you the idea of a person that understands everything, that is connect with present, part, and past and future, and this person somehow is in a limbo, in an artificial heaven, and is bringing us, which is totally not true, but we want to believe that, is giving us the answers. That's the key thing. We don't have answers, and these shamans doesn't have answers, but somehow we think they are the path to find those solutions. So I bring that to my work. Even myself, now, in the recent years, I impersonate this idea. I realized that it's very important that also me, as the creator of the work, looks frequently as this kind of shaman. I'm not crazy. I'm not at all. I'm just a regular person, but I realize that people enjoy the fact that me in my work and in interviews and in general in my text and everything, I kind of represent the idea of a witch
Yeah.
or a shaman. And the more I do it, the more this idea works. And this happens as well to Joseph Beuys. You mentioned that. People
Yeah.
want us artists to be their witches and shamans.
Yeah.
And I
Joseph Boys
think,
was good. This motherfucker had a
I
cane,
think
shit, even the big hat and all that. And also, I'm
exactly,
remembering as you talk, and I
but we are
this is
not.
a
We are
I
not.
knew
It's just a beautiful ceremony based on the spiritual idea. But honestly, we are as lost as everybody. We're just
your
bringing
work.
questions to the show. No?
Absolutely. The questions that people sometimes think are answers and are disguised as questions, or questions disguised as answers, something shit like that. But your work, I didn't realize until you were just kind of talking about the shamanism stuff, and like it was one of those things that I connected it without realizing, but it was like subconscious. But like, yeah, like Hodorowski, I feel like is he an influence of yours?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Even
yeah,
visually, even though his visuals are so much different than yours, but I'm looking at the slideshow, it just keeps on playing, and I'm seeing like the shapes even and stuff, like the compositions, the themes are I'm starting to see a Hodorowski come through in this a little bit, which is
yeah.
fun. It's really fun. Another dimension to view your work through. So this idea of the shaman and to me, like the shaman, it's not fake, it's not real, and because the shaman to me is like kind of the one who takes it upon themselves, or has been, chosen, I guess, in some cultures they see, or whatever, but like however it is, like more attuned to the unknown, and is able to go into that unknown and bring things out of the unknown in a more, what's the word, tangible way, maybe. Whether it be a two-dimensional object, a three-dimensional object, or just an idea, being able to vocalize it better than anybody else. But that's a shaman to me. They can be authors, writers. That's the artist as a shaman. Somebody who is spending their time going into that metaphysical darkness and trying to bring back things that have something to say, not good or even bad, but from some other dimension. And I see that as very real, but I see like the necessity of the performance along with it of the shaman, how it can enhance it and play with the belief structures of the people viewing it, and help them enter into a liminal space that might not be as accessible if you're just like, hey, I went into the darkness and here's some information. You know
Yeah,
what I'm saying?
yeah,
Where you just
yeah.
come up with like this and making art about it is one way. Like, so I often view myself as a shaman, as without the ego of that idea, but like, and in that way, I also feel there is a level of responsibility too. Do you ever feel that?
Yes, yes. I absolutely agree with the things you said. For example, that it is not fake. I respect deeply ceremonies and what they mean, and the meaning behind the shaman, because I think also, as you mentioned, that they connect us with something spiritual, and they connect us with death, and what we expect from death, in a way, no, what is beyond the afterlife. And this is absolutely true. The interesting part of it is that they have to impersonate, they have to create for us this ceremony, no, these elements, and this is what I describe in my work. Also, myself, I have some personal experiences related to death, and I have also read, me myself, I live those things, and this is the reason I also read about people that have been clinically dead, and then they can explain what happened in between, let's say.
NDEs,
Exactly.
NDEs, right?
Yes,
Near death experiences. Yes.
exactly. There's a beautiful book about a writer from the United States, actually, that resumes all these experiences. It's a
What's it
very
called?
famous book. I, mm,
I can look it. I'll find it.
Sorry, I don't remember it. It's because I'm speaking in English, and sometimes I
Oh,
read it in.
good. I'll find it.
I think the title is very literal. It's something like experiences beyond life. It was very literal.
Okay.
I'll sit down and I'll give it to you.
Did,
What I
did you
meant
watch
is
that Netflix show
what?
about the Netflix TV show about what, oh fuck, OA? It's all about this. To
No.
some extent, it's a fictionalized science fiction, but it's all about a dude who is like capturing people who have
Ah,
experienced near death experiences, and he tries to like extract blah blah blah. But the whole thing, it's like jumping through time and space, and but it's all comes back to, that's why I knew the term NDE. It's just because I loved that fucking show. So
okay.
anyways, watch the OA. If
Okay.
but anyways, please go on. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, very interesting. I'll watch it. I didn't know about that. I was in the end only saying that what my work represents is what shamans and witches somehow represents for us and from their own societies. I give to the public some idea of a new folklore, a new shamanism based on ancient shamanism, because in the end we need that to connect with some sort of spiritual feeling. I totally understand that, and this from an anthropological perspective, it is so meaningful that I think, at least me as an artist, there's no sense to speak about anything else beyond that. I'm just based on this, focus on this, and the deeper I go into this idea, the more I can explain that to the public, or give it to the public, better than explain, give it to the public in a more precise way. This is the reason of my work, nothing beyond that. Speak about that in a better, more beautiful and precise way. This idea of shamanism and futurism all the time, you know?
So you definitely believe in a spiritual dimension, then, philosophically, I guess.
Yes. I wasn't, when I was younger, I was not spiritual at all, nothing at all. But the older I become, and because of some experiences I said I had, now I am a more spiritual person. But I know that it's critical. It's kind of, when you say that in certain situations, people may think, oh, this guy like, no, but I don't think so at all. I think it's so logical. If you study story and anthropology and just observe people and different cultures, that is very natural. I'm just comfortable on this idea, and I am not scared about that anymore. When I was young, I was like, no, none of these things exist. It makes no sense. And I feel like, well, just open your mind and you will see, no?
A lot of it, I feel like, rests on language too, like the inadequacy of language in general. When you just, because you say certain words, but then it's like there's no other word really that we can use that make, so it's a lot of it, I think, just comes down to those things, like misunderstandings of, because it's like, on some sense, it's like everybody can relate to certain things and be like, well, then that's the spiritual, like you believe, like you can kind of get almost everybody there in some way. I just had to ask like outright, because a lot of people would just reject it. But I'm one of those people who definitely believe in something outside of my five senses. Like we have five senses. Do I believe that I'm the perfect instrument to experience whatever reality may be? That seems just egotistical. Even, like, no, I don't believe that. So there is something else. When you say spiritual, then people start thinking about God, but I just am like, more than me. How about that? More than what the fuck we know or can know. That's what I believe in, more than we're capable of knowing. Like I believe like we're limited in our capability of understanding, and there is something outside of our limits of understanding. To me, that is the spiritual dimension. And anybody that wants to argue that, I think it's crazy, because it's like, really, you think that we're capable of understanding everything? Like that's unreal. So like, it's cool to see an artist of your level and working on your, like, in such a clinical way about the spiritual dimension. That's really, I think, what's coming through when I'm looking at your work. I'm still looking at your work, but like I'm seeing this Hodorowski, but for 2030, for the future, of what we think 2030 is now, but not the real 2030, It's fantastic. Not to simplify or try to break it down into anything.
Thank you. I take it. I think it's a beautiful compliment. Thank you. Really.
Thank you. Good. Well, I wanted to ask, like, we didn't really even get into like materiality or anything like that specifically, but when it comes to your work, I feel like people just need to look at it and experience it. Because if you talk about the materials, it's not going to come across right. Because like I said, your work looks like a cloud, or not looks, but it's like a cloud, but there's concrete and there's drones and there's things that you would think come across very hard and hard. So maybe to wrap this up, is there just anything that we didn't touch on, or that you think is important for somebody who's about to go into viewing your work, or who is very interested in experiencing your work that they should know or you want them to know before we call this an episode?
Perhaps we could say that, or highlight, or that, as you somehow describe, that in the work in the end that I do is digital. People tend to think that everything is so digital about it and so artificial, which is true. They are right, but honestly, everything happens in the exhibition space physically. Both things happen at the same time. When you enter the exhibit, what I like the most is film and make my films and my video arts, and at the same level, create my installations for the exhibitions, the site-specific experiences I put for the public. When you enter the exhibitions and you see those things, you understand that they are digital and artificial at the same time, and that's comfortable and scary and uncanny altogether. And I love to bring to the public this some sort of twisted experience, darky thing, full of light. Also, some kind of light nightmare, if we can call it like this, some sort of clinical experience. And you have that feeling in my exhibitions in different levels. So if you touch my installations, you will feel in all of them that every material is soft, is nice, is tender, elastic, and sweet and gentle. If you listen the sound in my exhibitions, you will see that is, again, everything is so sweet, so calm, so wellness, and you see the smoke, and also you can smell frequently mint or eucalypt. Everything is in every level. Everything it gives you this idea. If you see my performers, you see that they are dressed with foamy, soft things with soft colors also, and they are moving in a very slow, yogi way. And the videos that are projected there in the screens are giving you the same idea. The music and the movements of the camera there, and the landscapes and the androids that appear, all of them are like that, like soft and tender and nice and sweet and so on. You kind of feel both at the same time, that you're in a natural, organic space, and at the same time in a very artificial, digital space. This balance, these extremes are together there, and also the idea of what you see there is both nice and tender and sweet, and uncanny and scary. You see these digital plants, and you see these real objects, and everything gives you the idea of being in some sort of neo rave or futuristic technological altar. And I love to give the public this idea. And when they give me feedback and they tell me that I have this and this experience and I felt that, I feel very happy when I realize that this equilibrium between those elements work. And I'm so happy about that fact, to give this ceremony to the public.
I love that. Light nightmare is just such a great term too. Like, yeah, like I was saying earlier, I'm obsessed too with this idea of like darkness being like light is the real darkness lately. But what? So like, not to drag this on, I'm sorry, but just like I guess I'm interested in the process of creating your installations. If a lot of your work starts on the level of the museum or the space, and you work from there, where they come to you or you go to them and say, or a space becomes available and then you make something for it, or are you working in your studio in such a nature that it's like, okay, now I need this space so that I can show this? You know what I mean? And then also too, how much are your hands in there and how much is being fabricated? Like how, like when you're putting together an installation or an exhibit, how many people are on the team? Do you know what I mean? Like, are you working with fabricators and stuff like that? So I don't want, I'm not asking you to like give away, take back the curtain and tell me the details, but I'm wondering just like what kind of the process is and what kind of people you're all working with to make one of these productions is what they seem mostly like, come together. Because it does seem like different levels though too. You have like, you can put a screen in a very nice sterile white room and that's quite impactful, but that's pretty easy too. But then some of this is like, I mean, even working with choreographers, I imagine, on some level. So these are productions. So could you just maybe briefly bring us through like a general workflow of that?
Yeah, sure. I love to move the
Take back the
curtain
curtain.
and tell my secrets. I love to do that. Uh, it's a very simple working process. I I am here, as I said before, all the time, surrounded by an exhibition. My studio
Yeah.
is an ongoing exhibition. Everything here is like in my shows. So let me put it this way. It goes into this direction. Here is like that all the time. What I represent in exhibitions is this mood and feeling that I have been describing during this talk. And this is the natural process. When a space, a museum, a gallery contacts me to make an exhibition, I uh, accept the exhibition when I know, only if I know, that I can create there in this space a site specific installation that gives you the same idea, the same thesis of my work that I give all the time. So, what I feel is that I only have one hammer, uh, and everywhere I look, I see a nail. No, I cannot do anything beyond that box. Everywhere I exhibit, I have to build those things. If I cannot build this artificial technological altar, this limbo, this soft cave, then I will not do the show. I need a certain light, a certain um, architecture, some specific elements to in order to build that, or we build them together. And then it comes the second part of the question. I need to work with more people because I have a very clear, as you have said before, language, colors, shapes, music, everything is very clear. And I enjoy and need also, it's very enjoyable to do that, to collaborate with people that can help me to do these things. Performers, choreographers, fashion designers. It's wonderful to work with these people. And it's very clear that that's the goal, to bring the people this idea. So when I make a show, we are like, okay, let's sit down and let's celebrate to give the people this thing. But it's clear that we have to do this thing all the time, is this thing, because it has to be done just better than the last one before, and it has to be new and better. But the thesis is very clear. This is the reason we use always the same colors and fashion designs and shapes and elements and music and so on.
You
No?
work with a lot of the same people over and over again, I
Yes.
imagine. Yeah. You're
Yeah.
probably like creating like a pretty solid team of people who understand the vision and can run with it. Now it's cool.
Yes.
Learning how to delegate a lot of that stuff can be such an important part of an artist practice. As I've found out myself too, but learning how to delegate because
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you're an amazing dancer, but like I can't, like I'm not. If I wanted somebody to dance in my piece, I would be like, well, somebody's gotta. I want to find the best person to do that because it's not me, So that's really cool. I admire that about your practice because you can really tell that like everything's considered. You do a great job of delegating I can say that because the end product is so strong and so dialed in, and like your visual language, your visual lexicon is so like just strong in so many ways. I can't define it, but that's kind of that definition of it in some way. Your soft cave, as you put it, is pretty on point. So with all this being said, in closing, where can people experience your work coming up? Is there a show coming up, or what would you like to promote or throw out there for everybody to? I mean, of course, they can follow you. I know that your presence on Twitter has been growing a little bit. You're on Instagram. Do you have any shows coming up?
I'm very happy to say that I have been doing a lot of shows during this part of the year, and now I don't happily. What I can tell to the people is I am in the sweetest moment ever, because right now I am mainly focused, and I invite the public to see this work in the future. I mainly focus in the post production of my new film. They will see that at the end of the year, and we are deciding where are we going to exhibit that.
Oh, fantastic.
The thing is that right now is a film. They will see that soon. It's a film where the protagonist is Alter 4. They can Google it. It's an marvelous android that is in Japan. Right now it's in Paris with Keishiro Shibuya making a wonderful opera. And this android is the main character of my new film video art. And I am focused on this idea, creating the editing and post-production of it. Keishiro will do the music. He's a wonderful composer, an amazing composer. And soon, in the next months, we will show that. But thanks God, I can be finally focused on the studio on this production. It's true that I have a solo show with my gallery, House of Chapath, on November. But beyond that, happily, I can be in the studio.
That's fantastic. I totally understand. I totally understand that clear path you have when you have a clear path in front of you. You know, like the openness of it is just so relieving, especially after exhibiting so much and everything. I'm in a similar position now. But so you do have a solo show in November with your gallery. Where is that? Berlin or Madrid?
That this gallery is both in Barcelona and Valencia in Spain.
Great. So that will be November, and then before the end of the year, we'll see a new film.
Yes, exactly.
Fantastic.
If I'm not mistaken, I know I have. I mean, there are more things, to be honest.
Of course.
But I prefer not to tell them because they are.
Yes, I understand. Well, that brings us to the very last point is where can people follow you? Because I mean, I keep everybody updated on like in the moment more. So I see that you do somewhat too. So like, where can I follow you along on Instagram and Twitter? What is your at
mitborrás in Instagram. They can see all the things that I'm doing in the current months and everything in my website, mitborrás.com, mainly in Twitter. I'm not very active in Twitter, to be honest, but I'm there. If they are active there, they can follow me.
Your website's fantastic. I do stress to everybody, if you have the time and you're listening to this still, go to mitborrás.com. And so it's there's tons of, it's a wealth of information and imagery. It's very pleasing to look through. So with that being said, Mitt, this has been a really, really dope conversation. I've been looking forward to it. It exceeded my expectations. I know that I have so much to think about and to just chew on in my mind. So thank you for your knowledge and your time. I hope to hear from you again shortly. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Take care. Thank you, Mitt, again.
It was a pleasure to speak with you. Really, it was an honor, a pleasure, and I really enjoyed the talk. Really, it was marvelous. Honestly.
Absolutely. Likewise, 100%. Thank you so much, Mitt. Thank you, everybody. Cheers. Peace.